Well, some good news for the people of Afghanistan. The last of the 30,000 U.S. troops that were sent to Afghanistan during Barack Obama's surge in the last 3 years have now officially left, which means that the troops were sent to fight the Taliban and give the Afghan government some breathing space so that they can go ahead and train their own soldiers in order to take over the peacekeeping duty in Afghanistan after the NATO and U.S. forces leave. Unless you count the permanent military bases that are going to be there from now on, which is usually not talked about. Now, 68,000 U.S. service personnel remain as so-called insider attacks are being launched from inside the Afghan military and from the police forces. These are Afghan forces attacking U.S. and NATO troops because they don't want them there, and they're angry that they're killing their own people. And there have been quite a few high-profile incidents just recently, earlier this week, or it was last week, or whenever it was. Afghan police turned on U.S. forces after the U.S. forces come to help them fight militants, and then it's being said that they actually went and joined those militants after the firefight. They were angry because of an attack that had killed 10 women and girls who were collecting firewood. Now, U.S. Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta did speak about this in a statement released by the Pentagon. This week, the ongoing effort in Afghanistan marked an important milestone. The United States military has completed drawing down the surge forces President Obama committed in December of 2009, reducing our presence by 33,000 troops on schedule. As we reflect on this moment, it is an opportunity to recognize that the surge accomplished its objectives of reversing Taliban momentum on the battlefield and dramatically increased the size and capability of the Afghan National Security Forces. Actually, this statement is not true. It has done almost nothing to curtail activities by the Taliban. In fact, there's been a massive resurgence of Taliban attacks and insider attacks that have come from the Afghan military and police themselves. I mean, this statement is not true. I mean, certainly there's been an increase in the size and the capability of the Afghan National Security Forces, but there's not been a diminishing of Taliban attacks. In fact, the Taliban has been gaining more support over time because of civilian casualties that keep being carried out by the United States and other coalition forces, not to mention the massacres that keep happening, but they're isolated incidents. Now, Panetta described this as the last gasp of the Taliban before they give up. I mean, that's just not true. There's no indication that this is a last gasp. It's been a steady increase. It's not like there's a massive surge before they fail. It's been pretty much a fairly steady climb in attacks and the ferocity in which. And the previous attack, which happened last week, in which $200 million in damage to the Air Force was doled out by Taliban militants who had U.S. uniforms who snuck onto military bases. So this is not like a last surge before they give up. I mean, this is just blatantly not true. It's been a steady incline in the sophistication and the technical capability of the attacks. Now, the thing is, they know they're losing the war, and they know they're not going to win, which is why they're going to go ahead and pull out the troops on schedule. They can't justify to the public to continue keeping them there because they know they're not going to win, and the public there'd be a great deal of public anger over the fact that they would be continuing, particularly on Barack Obama, which is the one who promised to bring them home to begin with. I mean, the strategy here is fairly obvious, and it could go two ways. One, they could pull the troops back, and because the Afghan forces are not ready to take over, and they're not going to be able to take over because the people don't support them, attacks are going to increase without the power of the U.S. military and the NATO forces there to occupy, and then the U.S. will use that as a justification to go back in, or they'll stay out for a little longer, the situation gets worse, and then they'll just completely wash their hands of the whole thing and say, look, they were ready, we handed it over like we said, and they just couldn't help themselves. They didn't want it, and thus you can go into the same old things that you can keep helping savage people all you want, but then in the end, if they don't want to change, they don't want to change. It's an old thing that they usually do. Like, you can just keep invading countries that are savages, that they call are savages, then kill a whole bunch of people, claim it's to civilize them, and then completely leave them in barbaric conditions that are most likely even caused by the people who went in to begin with, and then claim, oh, you just can't help them. Like as if bombing them and destroying all their infrastructure and killing them on mass droves, say 1.5 million like in Afghanistan, and then claim, oh, well, they just don't want to help themselves. They're there because they want to be in such desperate poverty. And it's a very old tactic. It's not just used against the Arab world. It's used against the poor in the first world as well, and against the poor in the third world as well. That's what I think is probably going to happen. There's probably going to be a case where they're going to pull out and then blame Karzai. Say, well, we left him ready to do everything themselves, and they just couldn't hold it together. They're just inherently bad people or savages or something like that, while not taking into account that they were a major cause of all the suffering in Afghanistan to begin with.